Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Will you turn with me to the 5th chapter of Isaiah? Isaiah is the first of the major prophets appearing in our scriptures, and prophets held the unique position in their worlds of proclaiming the truths of God to a people that was often too hardened to hear it. The prophet was a witness to a world that would rather trade repentance for wrath. The recorded messages of these mouthpieces of God provide for us today lessons in human history, timeless warnings even of our own wanderings, missteps, and injustices in our interactions, public and private, religious and political, social and economic. Now, I want you to know in Isaiah 5, the portion we're about to read, it has its own historical context. Make no mistake, it is about the nation of Israel. Nations, plural, if you want to be specific, for by this time the disagreement over who was king of God's people had resulted in the dividing of these people into two kingdoms, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. But this context, though it's nearly 3,000 years old, describes the moral failing of God's people that I think you will find relevant even today. As we read these words, do consider that the prophet stands out as something of a noble but sad exception. He's the leader who communes with God in the midst of a people who have abandoned him. He's a warning that the decline of a nation is a grief to the righteous remnant who do not participate in the deeds of the unrighteous. He's an example of the loyal servant, able to see even within his grief the stability and security and the sanctity of life in God. When the prophet speaks, society is either nearing or has already reached a turning point, a point of reversal, a point of replacement. Things are no longer as they should be. And in Isaiah 5, we're going to see, to begin with, this reversal in a poetic imagery. You're going to see a love song that hits a sour note. You're going to see the fruitless outcome from fertile ground. You're going to see God-ordained blessing thwarted by disobedience. And you're going to see disappointment where there should be delight. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 1. Let me sing now for my well-beloved, a song of my beloved concerning his vineyard. My well-beloved had a vineyard on a fertile hill. He dug it all around, removed its stones, and he planted it with the choicest vine. And he built a tower in the middle of it, and he hewed out a wine vat in it, and he expected it to produce good grapes, but it produced only worthless ones. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem, men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? Why, when I expected it to produce good grapes, did it produce worthless ones? So now let me tell you what I'm going to do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it will be consumed. I will break down its wall, and it will become trampled ground. I will lay it waste. It will not be pruned or hoed, but briars and thorns will come up. And I will also charge the clouds to rain, no rain on it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his delightful plant. Now, upon revealing that the prophet's love song points to the very real-life relationship between God and the people of Israel and Judah, the poetic is going to give way to the very direct. He looked for justice but behold bloodshed. For righteousness, but behold a cry of distress. The theologian E.J. Young offers this insightful view. The chief characteristic of this song is lament, and this soon gives way to denunciation. In a certain sense, we may say that as the vineyard disappointed the Lord, so the song disappoints us. It's not entertainment to which we're introduced, but teaching. I must say, in a similar vein, this sermon is a disappointment. The third Sunday of January is acknowledged in many churches as Sanctity of Life Sunday, not just a way to bring before us the important acknowledgement of the source and therefore the sacredness of this gift we have of existing in the image of God, but because we, as did the people of the prophet's day, failed to honor life, failed to protect it for the most vulnerable. Sanctity of Life Sunday marks the anniversary of the Supreme Court decision in which abortion on demand became for us in the United States the law of the land. I look forward to the Sunday when that is not the case. Until then, I believe it the pastor and the church's job to proclaim with the prophet that we have struck the sour note, that we have rendered barren the fertile ground, that we have spurned blessing with disobedience, and we have secured disappointment where there should be delight. We've traded justice for bloodshed. And as the witness against our abandonment of righteousness, we've muffled the cry of distress before it could even take its first breath. What follows in the text from Isaiah is a series of woes, an expression of deep suffering, of deep grief, and a warning of impending doom to the guilty parties. From the 6 woes that are presented in Isaiah, what I want you to see from each is a characteristic of cultural decline. Within each is a reversal of what should be, or a trade-off of one thing for another. Each of these trade-offs could and does manifest itself in several cultural vices or individual immoralities. That's just the nature of sin. It's not confined to this little section. It's not content to say in this quadrant. And so each trade that we make, each replacement that we see within these woes will manifest in various deadly ways, and it will for untold multiple lives in ongoing generations. But this morning, let's consider how each contributes to our failure to extend the most basic, fundamental right to everyone, the right to live. Verse 8. Woe to those who add house to house and join field to field until there is no more room, so that you may have to live alone in the midst of the land. Now the prophet isn't speaking here against wealth per se. He isn't speaking against property ownership per se, but rather he's speaking against Israel's failure to understand the principle of shared blessing from God and sharing the blessing with others. It had become the case that the wealthy had brought up all of the land to where they lived next to each other and squeezed everyone out. You see, one's individual pursuit had become more important than other individuals. In the first cultural woe, the reversal or the replacement that I want you to see is this: community is replaced by accumulation. Community is replaced by accumulation. What one wants for himself, what one wants for herself, accomplishments, accolades, social standing, careers, those become more important than the community. When you trade accumulation for community. You will sacrifice the one thing required for community to persist: new life. Perhaps you saw the clip from last year's Golden Globe Awards in which a winning actress credited her ability to achieve that very moment due to her ability to abort her children. She deemed that life as insignificant compared to hers. And she robbed that child, and she robbed herself, and she robbed the community of life. But she traded it for a false sense of community. One more mansion in Hollywood Hills. One more privileged walk on the red carpet. One more barren belly that fits well in a designer dress. Woe when community is replaced by accumulation. Verse 11. Woe to those who rise early in the morning that they may pursue strong drink, who stay up late in the evening that wine may inflame them. Their banquets are accompanied by the lyre and harp, by tambourine and flute, and by wine. They do not pay attention to the deeds of the Lord, nor do they consider the work of his hands. With this woe, this next characteristic of cultural decline that we see, the next trade is this: worship is replaced by entertainment. Worship is replaced by entertainment. The pursuit of an eternal God is replaced by the pursuit of empty pleasures. It's not that strong drink or staying out late or wine is evil. They're not. It's not that we can't host banquets and make music, but it is the case that all of those things lose their meaning outside of our sense and service to God. The realization that all of life's pleasures point to him. When worship is replaced by entertainment, we will fill our days pursuing pleasure in godless context. Our bodies and the bodies of others will become the means for a good time. And any intrusion into that life, and especially into our youthful existence, will have to be eliminated. Community is replaced by accumulation. Worship is replaced by entertainment. And thus we have violated the two great commands to love God and to love neighbor. Once that takes place, cultural characteristic number 3 occurs. Rest in God is replaced by the hard work of sin. Rest in God is replaced by the hard work of sin. Here it is in verses 18 and 19. Woe to those who drag iniquity with the cords of falsehood. And sin they drag as with cart ropes. And they'll say, let God make speed. Let him hasten his work that we could see it. Let the purpose of the Holy One of Israel draw near and come to pass that we may know it. Implication is, if it exists. Having rejected God, having rejected the image of God in another, you'll not simply rid yourself of a religious burden. Having rejected the only legitimate object of worship, and having rejected your true identity, you will have to replace those things with something from this world. And you will have to convince yourself of its worth, and you will drag it with you. And the more that you strain, and the more that you pull sin with a cart rope along an earthly path, the more you're going to be bound by that which is behind you, and the more you're going to be blinded to a God that's above. Rest in God is replaced by the hard work of sin. And with that blindness comes the next woe, the ultimate reversal, the complete substitution of opposites. Verse 20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Reality itself is upended. Cultural characteristic number 4, truth is replaced by convenient lies. Truth is replaced by convenient lies. Reason is replaced by insanity. Much has been said recently of George Orwell's classic novel, 1984. Parallels being drawn from Orwell's prescient work to the events of our time. You may remember with that novel the invention of newspeak, and with it the concept of doublethink. That dystopian society was characterized by the restriction of language and the embracing of contradictory thought. It was like Isaiah's warning, a society in which evil was called good and good was called evil. You see, in Orwell's world, doublethink was revealed in statements such as war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. The ministry of peace was, of course, concerned with war. The ministry of truth in that novel perpetuated lies. The ministry of love relied upon torture. The ministry of plenty rationed food. Clever in a novel, sinister in real life. We've embraced our own doublethink. The most prominent organization responsible for the destruction of that which is the very essence of family is called Planned Parenthood. It is the opposite. It's the purposeful avoidance of becoming a parent, and it is brought about by that which is the opposite, not the giving of life, but the taking of the child's life. But this sort of doublethink is what we're being led to embrace. We protest that which we should unanimously approve, and we celebrate that which celebrate that which should break our hearts. Watch this clip. Apart from the context of this sermon, where I ask you what you just saw, you might guess that maybe it was a crowd's reaction to a sporting event, maybe the reaction to some entertainer that just came on stage, maybe some major giveaway in which those in attendance had received some great gift. But what you just saw was the reaction from last year's crowd gathered just last month to hear the results of an Argentinian vote that just legalized abortion. Listen to the doublethink that follows from the Argentinian president. Quote, safe, legal abortion is now the law. Safe, legal murder. He went on to say, today we're a better society that expands women's rights and guarantees public health. Not the rights of the little girl whose body lies in pieces on a tray in a hospital. Not the guarantee of her health. And it's not just a problem in Oceania, and it's not just a problem in Argentina. It's America's problem. This week we inaugurate new leadership, one in which all elected phases are controlled by one party. And parties have stated platforms that we as responsible citizens should weigh. I'm sure that you've read it, but let me simply remind you that this is the platform that we voted for. I quote, We are committed to protecting and advancing reproductive health, rights, and justice. Every woman should be able to access high-quality reproductive health care services, including safe and legal abortion. We believe that comprehensive health services include access to reproductive care and abortion services, and they're vital to the empowerment of women and girls. Doublethink. Destroying a pregnancy is called reproductive health. Taking a life is called reproductive rights. And stopping the beating heart of an innocent child is called reproductive justice. But all is well because it's safe and it's legal. Destroying one's ability to become a mother is that which we've deemed vital to the empowerment of women and girls. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Community is replaced by accumulation. Worship is replaced by entertainment. Rest in God is replaced by the hard work of sin. Truth is replaced by convenient lines. And the fifth is this: wisdom is replaced by self-deception. Verse 21, woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Now, I don't have time to outline the so-called wisdom and cleverness of the abortion machine. I've preached on them before, and I can make those notes in that sermon available to you if you want it. I can tell you what some are. Their bumper sticker false mantras go something like this: my body, my choice. You can't legislate morality. Abortion is a decision only for women and for doctors. It's just a clump of cells. A culture of accumulation and entertainment that rests not in God but works hard at sin, that lies to itself. It must validate these choices by its own self-declaration of wisdom, and it will have to twist it just ever so cleverly so as not to have the plain sense of conviction. Our last woe. Woe to those who are heroes in drinking wine and are valiant men in mixing strong drink, who justify the wicked for a bribe and take away the rights of the ones who are in the right. The last woe for the culture in decline is this: the hero is replaced by the playboy. The price we will pay and are paying of this great women's issue is that we lose not only part of what it means to be a woman, but also what it means to be men. When we unite as men and women, when we unite as co-image bearers, we understand God and one another better. When we separate, we will fail to see God, and we will destroy one another as we destroy ourselves. So men, you are called to channel and to wield your strength at the appropriate time. It means not impregnating a woman that's not your wife. It means encouraging women in our lives to choose life, which is much, much more than just a biological event, but it is a lifelong commitment to fatherhood and to family. It means educating yourself about the lies of both the entertainment and medical communities regarding what normal sexual and reproductive habits are. Quit destroying your mind and your soul and your current or your future wife with pornography. Quit passively allowing the women in your life to destroy their bodies and the bodies of their young children with pills and other so-called contraceptive devices. Learn what it means to be a good human. Learn what it means to be a good man. Learn what it means to be a good friend. Learn what it means to be a good husband. Learn what it means to be a good father. Learn what it means to be a good citizen. Be a hero and a valiant man in the right things. Community is replaced by accumulation. Worship is replaced by entertainment. Rest in God is replaced by the work of sin. Truth is replaced by convenient lies. Wisdom is replaced by self-deception. The hero is replaced by the playboy. But our actions, our cultural decline is not the last word. In the midst of such deception, God has 3 big therefores for Israel. I close with those. Verse 13. Therefore, my people go into exile for their lack of knowledge, and their honorable men are famished, and their multitude is parched with thirst. If we follow the path of these woes, God might allow us to be absorbed by a culture that will neither honor nor provide for its people. Verse 14, therefore. Therefore, Sheol, hell, the grave, has enlarged its throat, and it's opened its mouth without measure. And Jerusalem's splendor, her multitude, her den of revelry, and the jubilant within her descend into it. If we follow the path of these woes, God might give us our culture of death, and with it, for those who survive, an equality of misery that will overtake everyone. Verse 24, Therefore, as a tongue of fire consumes stubble, and dry grass collapses into the flame, so their root will become like rot, and their blossom blow away as dust, for they've rejected the law of the Lord of hosts, and they've despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. For the nation that follows the path of these woes, that nation that promotes the destruction of life, might be itself permanently destroyed for rejecting God and His living word.